See faces appearing. Okay, welcome to our fourth best talk of the semester. This is our last talk. I'm Dan Noyes. I work here in the advancement department at Houghton. We're glad to have you here. I should mention before we get started that the other best talks that we've done this semester and the ones that we've done last semester are all recorded. They're on the Best Talks website on the Houghton College webpage. We've done, this is the fourth panel this semester. We've had about 20 guests come in fields like education, accounting, data science, and this one is, of course, for folks in the health professions. If you're here and interested in health professions, you might also check last semester's best talk that we did with Precious Barnes, who's a physician in Washington State, who's still early in her career, but has an amazing story to tell. And you can watch that anytime that you like. But for today, we have Dr. Jamie Potter here, who runs our health professions here at Houghton and advises all of our pre-health students. And I'm going to turn it over to her in just a second. As you have questions, you can submit those in the chat directly to Dr. Potter, and we will save those questions for the end. But Dr. Potter, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Pleasure to have you all here with us tonight. I see some names and faces that I do recognize, both students and individuals who work at the institution. So I'm happy that we are all here today, and I'm happy that we have the opportunity to be able to talk to three of our distinguished alumni about their journeys and how Houghton has helped them along the way in those journeys. If you, as Dan mentioned, if you have questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. I will try to keep an eye on them and bring them up and present them as time goes along. It's a little bit hard to be able to, raise your hand and actually ask a question because of the number of individuals that we have here. So throw it in the chat. That's a little tiny box at the very bottom of your screen. It says chat, looks like a little bubble that you would see on a cartoon, and we'll be able to have those conversations. So I'm going to start off by asking each one of them, as though we were sitting in a room together as a panel discussion, to talk to us a little bit about just where they're at. So of course, their names, which you already heard, but where they're at in terms of where they are at in their career, as well as where they physically are located right now. So I'm going to turn it over and let them begin to speak, and then we'll filter on back to a couple. Well, actually, I have lots of other questions that I can ask, or you can continue to ask questions, and I will shoot those out to them as well. Gwen, we'll start with you.
So I'm Gwen Stokes, and currently I am a first-year dental student at LECOM School of Dental Medicine in Bradenton, Florida. And I'm also a second lieutenant in the Army on a health profession scholarship.
I can go next. I'm Elizabeth, or Lizzie Yordy. I have a new title of doctor as of May of last year. So I graduated Houghton in 2016 and started medical school at LECOM in Erie, so Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine. Graduated again last May, and I started my family practice residency in Altoona, Pennsylvania at UPMC. So I've been here since June, loving life as a resident physician so far. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about being a resident too.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Jordan Scott. I am a graduate of Houghton College in the class of 2017. I am currently a final year student pharmacist at the Uville School of Pharmacy in Buffalo, New York. The way pharmacy school works is 3 years of didactic work and then 1 year of clinical rotational experiences. So I'm currently in that final year of clinical experiences. I have one clinical rotation left, which is 6 weeks long. That's standing between me and graduation. So happy to be with everyone here tonight.
All right, so we're going to circle back through. So obviously you're all alumni of the institution. So what were your majors and minors that you might have picked up, and maybe some things that you did along the way in terms of if you were part of clubs, if you were part of any type of athletic program, things like that that kept you engaged outside of the classroom? You can go in the same order, or you can mix it up. I want it to be as flexible as possible.
Yeah, I can start for that. So I graduated, like I said, in 2017. I majored in biochemistry. And while I was at Houghton, I kind of had my hand in many different clubs and organizations. I was a member of the basketball and tennis team, as well as a resident assistant. I served 1 year in Roth and then moved down to the townhouses and served as a resident assistant there. And then since I was pretty involved in athletics, I served as the SAC representative, so the Student Athletic Advisory Committee for the basketball program. And then from there, I ended up serving as the president of the Houghton College SAC for 2 years while I was a student.
I'll go next. So like I said, I graduated in 2016. I walked in May, but I actually officially graduated in December of 2015. And my major was general biology. I did do a minor in psychology as well, because at the time I was really interested in psych and thought that I wanted to go into a psychiatry residency. Did change my mind, but I still do really enjoy psychology. And in terms of extracurricular things, I was a member of the track and field team in my freshman year. I had to stop because I developed compartment syndrome in my leg, so I sort of gave up running. But I did have a really good experience with the track team at Houghton. And I wasn't really a part of many clubs on campus. I remember being a tutor for the genetics class one semester, and I was a tutor for a Latin history course as well. So that's pretty much it, but I enjoyed all the different activities that Houghton had to offer, and I missed Koinonia. I went to those frequently, so I had a good experience at Houghton.
So I graduated in 2020, this last May, and at Houghton, I was a part of the cross country and indoor and outdoor track teams. I also was the vice president of the Pre-Health Professions Club, and I did a year of ROTC my senior year, and that was what kind of got me into the Army.
What was your major, Gwen?
Oh, I was a biology and math major with a minor in chemistry.
All right, so let me quickly check the chat. We're still okay there. All right, so we've had a little bit about your majors, but where you are now. So tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now. What are some of the key events that happened during your time at Houghton, whether it was related to experiences at Houghton or not, but how did you choose to go into the field that you're now pursuing?
Yeah, I can get it started again. So actually, funny story, when I came to Houghton as a freshman, I was an education major. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I liked science, and I thought I wanted to maybe teach high school chemistry, coach a high school basketball team because I love sports. But as I kind of progressed through Houghton, I realized that I really did love the science program. I wanted to take more science classes, and I didn't want to not take those classes to fill them with the education classes. So I figured, worst case scenario, I could go back to Teachers College in Ontario because I'm Canadian, and do that after getting a Bachelor's of Science in some sort of science field. So as I progressed through, I really just kind of loved chemistry classes, but I did like the biology mixed in there. It's why I majored in biochemistry. But the one class that really introduced me to, I guess, the profession of pharmacy was I took a medicinal chemistry class with Dr. Taraka, which was an elective class for my major. And we kind of talked about the drug development process, different professions involved in that process, and pharmacy came up. And so that's when I really started to look into pharmacy. And the one thing that really drew me to pharmacy school was it was 4 years, and it gave me 4 more years to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. Because when I graduated, I still wasn't sure. And I didn't really know what opportunities were available as a pharmacist. So I'm really glad I had those 4 years to continue to figure things out, and excited to now be entering the profession soon.
Gwen, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I came into Houghton thinking that I wanted to be a dentist, but then, and I applied for the early acceptance program, I think my sophomore year. But then like I wasn't sure if that was what I really wanted to do because I'd been taking more math classes and really enjoyed it. And the thing that solidified dentistry for me was doing the for my experiential biology credit, doing internship over the summer, and like just getting hands-on experience was really like, okay, yeah, this is what I want to do. And I went from there basically.
And then for me, I actually came into Houghton as an undecided major. I knew that I did want to do something in the healthcare field and do some type of major in the sciences because I really enjoyed biology. And sort of looking back in high school, I kind of enjoyed a little bit of everything. So it was kind of hard to decide on a specific major, but I took some biology classes and decided on that. And then I think the psychology courses in minor just arose as an interest. I think we took an initial kind of psychology 101 course, and I really enjoyed it and thought maybe I wanted to go into the healthcare field to work as a psychiatrist. But I sort of had in the back of my mind that I wanted to do something more as well. And my dad was a big inspiration for me. He's also a family doctor, and I used to shadow him frequently when I was younger and didn't necessarily want to just jump in his footsteps and do the same thing. I kind of wanted to pave my own path. But ultimately, I decided that I really liked the breadth of what a family medicine doctor does. So I applied for the early acceptance program at LECOM, also in my sophomore year. And I interviewed at LECOM at the end of my sophomore year, I believe. So I heard back from them kind of around the end of my sophomore year and junior year that I was accepted. And that was a huge relief for anybody who's in the process of applying to medical school or just really any professional school. It can be really expensive, time consuming with applications, stressful with traveling to different interviews. So this saved a lot of that, that stress and the time. And really, it was just one interview at LECOM. I didn't apply to any other program. So I was sort of committed to going there. And that is one of the, not really downsides, but just one of the effects of doing the early acceptance program is with LECOM is you can only be at that school. So LECOM, I don't know. I mean, it was a good place. It's medical school. I can answer more questions about it specifically if you have questions, but I was in Erie, Pennsylvania. And then since I'm from Central PA, I chose to do all my 3rd and 4th year clinical rotations in Du Bois, which was a smaller sort of community hospital. But I thought it was a great place to learn and train. They did have a small family medicine residency program, and they took LECOM students a few per year. So it was a great experience to work one-on-one with the attendings and to work with some of the residents as well. So sort of that experience, and then just through the interview process in 4th year, I looked to several different family medicine residencies. I also applied to psychiatry just to see if there was kind of an off chance that something would come up. But I definitely got more interviews for family medicine. So kind of applied mostly in the northeastern sort of Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York region. But I did throw out a couple random ones like Alaska and just places in the West. And I did hear back from Alaska, but didn't go. So I knew that I wanted to stay somewhere in Central PA. And Altoona was just, it was my last interview of the season and was my favorite interview and felt like I belonged. So that's how I ended up in Altoona. So again, I'd be happy to answer more questions about that too.
So Jordan, both Gwen and Lizzie went through our early acceptance program with LECOM. So they made their decision very early. You went through the long process of having to actually go through all of the interview season, have to do your PCAT, you had to actually go through the PTCAS, all of the things in order to actually figure out where you're going to school. So how did you finally decide that D'Youville was the place for you?
Yeah, so through the pharmacy school application season, I, again, similar to what Lizzie was saying, I kind of stayed in the local. I didn't want to travel too far. I'm Canadian, so I live actually an hour from Buffalo over the Canadian border. So when I came to Dieuville, I could see the Peace Bridge, which was the bridge I crossed to go back and forth from home to the United States from the school. So that was a big draw. It was as close as I could get to home. And Dieuville did a really great job at offering some scholarships for professional students. Again, doing a 4-year undergraduate degree and then going to a 4-year professional graduate school can be costly. So Dieuville was one of the schools that offered some good scholarship opportunities for students. And they had a really nice experiential program. So throughout pharmacy school, you're required to do a certain amount of rotations during the first 3 years while you're kind of in your didactic portion. Dieuville does a great job at setting you up for those rotations, whereas a lot of other pharmacy schools locally have you call pharmacies and hospitals to set up those experiences and get those hours on your own time. That can be intimidating and difficult to do, especially when you're in the midst of completing a rigorous academic program. So it was really nice that the way Dieuville structured their program, they take a 2-week break in the middle of each semester. They set you up for that rotation and you go and complete the required hours. So that was kind of the big selling point for me. But there are plenty of pharmacy schools. I believe there's 145 pharmacy schools around the country. And I didn't look at a lot of those. So if you are someone interested in pharmacy, there are schools always popping up. My first year at Dieuville, a new school opened at Binghamton. So there's plenty of opportunities, and each school has some new nuances and a little bit of different things to consider when you're going through that application process.
So you brought up money. You're Canadian, so some of the financial aid wouldn't have been available to you. But for all of you, how much did money or does money play a role in choosing your career and then choosing the path that you're taking? You're already in your career, but you still get to, like for Lizzie, you had to choose a subspecialty in where you're going to actually practice eventually. Gwen's still much earlier in the journey. She has to choose what area of dental medicine she wants to go into. Jordan has to choose what type of pharmacy he wants to go into. How does money or what other factors were the greatest in impacting the choices that you made for your career?
I can start with this one. So in general, we've always sort of heard that there's a big need for more primary care practitioners sort of all over the board. And usually, I mean, in general, the salary of a primary care physician is on average a lot less than some of the other specialties. I have friends, for example, that have gone into surgery or anesthesia, and those specialties typically pay a lot more, but sometimes the lifestyle might not be as good. So, I mean, family medicine, once I get out, it'll be kind of a typical work week, like sort of your standard 8 to 5 type of job. But in general, I would say a pretty good lifestyle. So I think lifestyle health was a factor to consider. And then in terms of money, I mean, medical school itself is pretty expensive, and I do have a significant amount of debt. I don't have to give numbers per se, but I will say that LECOM is one of the most inexpensive medical schools in the country. So if you are thinking of medical school, that is maybe something to consider as well. I also, I guess I'm kind of crazy, and I took a master's course through LECOM too. So I'm still actually working on it. It's in biomedical ethics. So I'm going to finish that up this May. And that's kind of an extra 20 grand or so to add to the sea of debt, I guess you could say.
At this point, does it really matter? Like that 20
But in reality, I don't think it really matters. So I wouldn't really worry so much about the cost of medical school. And then in terms of sort of the resident salary and things, it's kind of standard again across the board. Looking at the actual hourly wage is kind of sad because it's roughly about $10 or $12 an hour. And we do work long work weeks up to 80 hours. is the ACGME limit. And then sort of thinking about future plans. I mean, there is a large need for primary care and kind of location in more rural areas. I'm thinking of staying kind of somewhere rural or just somewhere that's more underserved in PA. So I know sometimes there is a larger salary draw for those types of locations just because there's such a big need, maybe compared to more of an inner city or large urban area. So I hope
There are
that answers
financial incentives. There are financial incentives for going to certain locations. So
yeah.
if you are in an underserved location, whether it be urban or rural, there are various programs that, not necessarily through the practice itself, but through the state, that help to be able to pay back some of those. So again, so from Lizzie, you shouldn't worry about money. What about you guys?
Yeah, I can go next. So my career decision was strongly influenced by the clinical experiences I had as a student. So just a little background, similar to medical school, pharmacists now can enter a residency in a clinical setting. It is, they're 1-year residencies, but you can do up to 2 years to get your specialty. So I decided, based on my clinical experiences, I really wanted to pursue a career as a clinical pharmacist, and actually recently just matched for a residency at Buffalo General Medical Center here in Buffalo with Kaleida Health. So I'm super excited for that. But my long-term goal would be to pursue a career as a clinical oncology pharmacist. As a final year student, I did 3 straight rotations at Roswell Park here in Buffalo, and I just absolutely loved the experience. It was extremely challenging, but seeing the impact that a pharmacist can have on patient care in an oncology setting just really kind of changed my perspective on what I wanted to do. So my plan is to pursue a 2nd-year residency in oncology, but obviously I have to get through the 1st year first. So I'd say that my biggest influence as a student in my career choice was the experiences that I have, and just kind of seeing the impact that the profession I'm entering can have in the setting that I want to enter.
So my situation's a little bit different because I am on an Army scholarship. So they're paying all of my school expenses and also a living stipend. And our residency programs work slightly differently too through the military. We have to apply for a general dentistry residency. We don't have to accept it. And then you can also do a residency in various other specialties, but often you have to wait a little while. And usually you still have to do the general residency. So I really don't know what I want to do yet.
You're still early. It's okay, Gwen. All right, so maybe a couple more fun questions. What was your favorite class at Houghton?
I can answer this one. It was a science class, but it was ornithology with Eli Knapp and Dr. Sullivan. It was the favorite class that I took. It really got me into enjoying birds, which is kind of random. But we spent a May term up at Houghton. So there weren't a lot of people on campus, and we would just kind of go exploring different places like Letchworth State Park. And there was kind of just different like marshes in the area. And then we flew out to Arizona, and we spent a week sort of camping and driving up from Phoenix to the Grand Canyon. And we stopped along the way and looked at different birds and just different sites, which was amazing. So that was hands down my favorite class.
Do you still do some birding now?
I do. It's been a while, but I just find like every time I'm outside, or even in the past summer when I would walk around, I would just hear birds and be like, oh, that's a whatever bird. And nobody else really knew. And they're like, okay. But yeah, I still do.
Gwen, how about you?
I took ornithology too, with Eli Knapp, and we went to Iceland, and that was a really amazing experience. But then I also think the research classes that I took in math and biology, it was really cool to like get hands-on stuff.
So for me, I also took a May term where with Dr. Kettlecamp, we went down to Honduras, to Utila, an island off the coast of mainland Honduras, and we learned to scuba dive. So that was obviously a once in a lifetime class experience. But my favorite class on campus at Houghton had to be a muscle biology elective I took with Dr. Poitras. I'm really been to fitness, played sports all my life, big into weightlifting, and so kind of learning a little more about how muscles work through that elective class. That was a really cool elective too. So that's probably my favorite class I took on campus.
So if you could come back just for one semester, what one more class? Oh, you got a thumbs up from Ransom there. So he's on the call. Just wanna, he's very happy for that answer, Jordan. Anyway, if you could pick one more class, it could be a class for fun. It could be, or a class to be able to better prepare you. If you could come back, so I guess two more classes. If you could come back and pick two more classes, what class would you pick for fun that you didn't take and you think, man, I missed that opportunity? And what other class would you might have wanted to add to boost your preparation? We'll start with Lizzie.
Okay. So the academic class would probably be anatomy. I didn't actually end up taking that. And I feel like it would have helped in some regards because, of course, we have sort of an extensive anatomy class right whenever you start medical school. But I think that maybe would have helped a little bit. And then a class for fun. I would obviously love to do ornithology again, but I also really enjoyed one of the painting classes that I did, I think with Professor Murphy. I did an oil painting class, and that was a really good experience, and I would definitely do that again too.
Gwen.
I think I agree with Lizzie. I would take anatomy because I didn't take that. And at least for us, our anatomy class is largely self-taught at LECOM. So it's really difficult to have no anatomy experience. But the fun class, I would probably take another equestrian class because I really enjoyed my equestrian classes.
And Jordan.
So the one class I would take if academically would be microbiology with you, Dr. Potter. I actually remember my senior year, I was sitting with Dr. Taraka and we were having an advisement meeting, and I really wanted to take micro because it was a prerequisite for a lot of pharmacy schools and it would have been extremely helpful, but it was offered at the exact same time as molecular and cellular biology, which I needed to complete my degree. So looking back in, I think I made the smart decision, making sure I graduated on time. But having a bit of a background in microbiology, entering pharmacy school, especially entering infectious disease courses, and I did an infectious disease rotation in my final year, would have really helped to have that baseline entering those types of classes. And then honestly, I was going to say the one class I would have taken for fun would have been ornithology. I've heard nothing but great things about it. And Lizzie and Gwen kind of confirmed that today. So that would kind of be the one class I'd want to take for fun.
All right. So I don't see Eli on the talk right now, but we will make sure that we tell him that any student that is part of the conversation tonight or comes back and listens to this might be signing up for ornithology. So he needs to be prepared for a larger than normal class size. All right, so I guess now I'll take it back to a more serious question. What advice would you give to a junior Houghton student as they think about preparing for your profession?
Yeah, I can go first with this one. I think the first thing I'd say is you don't have to know what you want to do yet. At this stage in the game as a junior, close to entering my senior year, I don't even think I knew I wanted to go to pharmacy school. But the one thing I will say is Houghton prepares you extremely well for professional graduate school. I walked into my first professional year at DUville, really wanting to focus on academics, work extremely hard. But the first year came very easy to me and I wasn't very challenged. And I think that's because I was so challenged at Houghton. And so Houghton is a very rigorous academic school. And the courses that you take are going to prepare you extremely well for graduate school. Doesn't mean that you don't have to work hard. You're obviously going to have to work hard, and as you progress through the program, it's going to get more challenging. But looking back on it, I really appreciate the rigorous academic program that Houghton provided me to prepare me for graduate school.
I can sort of echo that in a sense. If you're thinking about medical school, and if it's not too late to do the early acceptance program, I would consider that, just because it takes a lot of stress off of the whole process. And it's also okay to not know what you want to do in medicine. A lot of people change their minds multiple times throughout the first few years, and even through rotations, things kind of solidify what you want to do or sort of steer you in a totally different path. So don't be intimidated if you don't know precisely what you'll end up doing in the future. Things will work themselves out sort of as you go, and you'll learn more about yourself in the process too. So, and then I would just also say that don't be alarmed when you start medical school. It is overwhelming, and everybody always describes it as drinking from a fire hose, like a fire truck hose, the amount of information, and it is a lot to process. And I would say also look into schools that have different learning styles for medical school. For example, LECOM has a lecture discussion pathway, which is the one that I did. So I thought I would benefit from more of a structured kind of lecture type environment, where you sit in classes and go through PowerPoints and there's different professors. But there's also programs that have, and LECOM has this as well, like more of an independent pathway where you sort of get the information and study it on your own and do modules and come in and take exams. And then LECOM also offers more of a problem-based or group-based learning pathway called PBL. And it's kind of like independent study, but it involves a lot more reading. You're not really in classes that often. And you do kind of more clinical, like patient-based scenarios to learn information, and then take sort of a few large tests every semester. So I would say sort of think about what your learning style is, and look into medical schools that have different learning styles that are geared towards what you think would help benefit you in the future.
Yeah, I would agree with both Lizzie and Jordan. Like, Houghton prepares you really well. I know when I took my DAT, it was a lot easier. I didn't have to review quite as much because we'd learned all of it already. And then the dental school at LECOM it is only PBL, but I felt like Houghton was really good at preparing me for that, because we're used to like talking to our professors and talking to each other in classes and not just like always being in a lecture. So I really enjoyed that, but you definitely need to make sure that that's something that you want to do and that you don't want just lectures.
What has been, as you transitioned from Houghton to your programs, what was some of the biggest challenges you faced?
I can go first. Yeah, I think the hardest thing was, like, I didn't know anyone here, and then we weren't allowed to see anyone, but we're all in Florida, so it was very, like, you didn't know. I still don't know all of my classmates, and I think that's been hard, because at Houghton you know everyone, but as everything opens up, like, you get to know people. But I think that was the biggest transition, is I went from knowing everyone, knowing my professors, to knowing no one.
Yeah, I think for me, the hardest thing was while I was at Houghton, you're so used to taking classes and studying material to pass a test, to pass the class. And as you transition to a health professional school, the material you're learning isn't to pass the test. I mean, ultimately it is, but you're going to be applying this to care for patients, to make decisions about their medications, their dosages, counseling them on some side effects they may have. And so really realizing that this information, you don't need to just know it to pass your test and pass your class. You need to know this information to provide the best care you can to your patients. So that transition of being able to learn the information, understand it, analyze it, and apply it to the clinical situations you're in is a little different, because when you're taking the foundational science classes at Houghton in like a bachelor's of science in biochemistry, you're not necessarily thinking about how to apply that to an actual person in a real life interaction.
Yeah, I agree with Jordan as well, and Gwen. Moving to a new place was hard. One of my classmates at LeCom was actually a graduate from Houghton as well. So we actually shared a house together for our first 2 years in Erie. Yeah, sort of, I guess, class-wise and information-wise, like Jordan was saying, you do have to sort of retain the information and not do a brain dump after a big exam, even though it's kind of hard to not really to do that just from the amount of material that comes. And let's see, I'm trying to think of what else. I think something that's also is sort of interesting or just eye-opening, I guess, is, I mean, Houghton, the class sizes are pretty big, and medical school also has a pretty big class size, but I wasn't used to sitting in a classroom with like 100 or 200 other people. And also realizing that if you may have been sort of at the top of your class at Houghton, you may just be average or kind of even below average maybe compared to everybody else at medical school. It can be sort of a competitive atmosphere. Not everybody has that type of attitude, but it is something that was different and something that you definitely saw, especially for people who wanted kind of more competitive specialties. There was definitely kind of an edge or just kind of something about being around people that have, I guess, that much more drive maybe to make and match into those top specialties. But I mean, in medical school, like it's okay to kind of be average. I think everybody in general is around the same level. Sort of when they go in, everyone was sort of near the top of their classes or did very well in undergrad. So just go in knowing that and try to keep doing your best and study hard and just give it your all every day.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the things that I remember from my husband's experience, was to realize that he wasn't now the person that always got the best grade in the class. And he was okay with that, but it was kind of an eye opener because everybody was now on the very same level of playing field because of the rigors of getting into the programs. So yeah, that level of competition can be steep, but also realizing that most of the people around you are also there, have the same level of understanding. And so that can be a benefit to be able to have those conversations. So what in your career, I know for Gwen, she's just starting out, so there may not be as much, and she's still dealing with all of the issues of not being able to see everybody. But for Lizzie, who is much farther along in her journey, and for Jordan, who's about ready to receive that diploma, hopefully not virtual, you'll actually get to shake some hands and receive an actual document. What has been the biggest reward from the experiences that you've had in your professions?
I can start off so far. So I guess something, and this might sort of relate to COVID as well, is we all got pulled from clinical rotations in our 4th year around March when everything started happening. So I lost some patient interaction, and even to sort of start off residency, we did a lot of our office visits through telemedicine, which was new and different, sort of cool in some aspects. But just getting back into patient care in general has been rewarding. And being an intern, we do a couple months on the OB/GYN floor, delivering babies. And I didn't do a ton of that as a medical student. I did some deliveries, but that's been a really rewarding aspect of that. And part of the ACGME requirements as a family medicine resident is throughout the course of your 3 years, you'll see at least 10 continuity pregnant patients. So from preconception or conception all the way through delivery, and then you can even see them in the postpartum period and see their children. So I've started to gather a few of those patients, and some have even requested to see me specifically, which I think is really rewarding. And it kind of is reassuring that I feel like I'm where I'm meant to be. and just kind of having compliments from patients like, I feel like you really listened to me, and no one has ever really looked into this much before, and things like that. So it is making those connections, I think, and just realizing that it feels like you're doing something right and making a difference in some way for someone.
Yeah, similar to Lizzie, my the one experience that I kind of look back on was the direct patient interaction I had while I was at Roswell Park. The two main things that pharmacists are kind of involved in, aside from patient rounds and making recommendations like that, are chemotherapy education and getting consent to administer chemotherapy, because that's a big thing that you have to do before you can start. And then discharge counseling. So when the patients leave the hospital, there's a lot of new medications that they're put on. And so the pharmacist will go in, counsel them on all these new medications, and make sure that they're clear on when to take their medications, how to take them, various side effects to watch out for. So as a student, I walked in, and it was one of my first chemotherapy educations, and you could tell the patient was distraught. It was difficult. They had just received their diagnosis. They wanted to start chemotherapy immediately. So the pharmacy team was called, and we went in. And it was a difficult conversation to have, but we were able to, as a team, kind of clear up some of the questions they had, answer some of the things they were worried about, talk about some of the side effects. And so then fast forward 5 days later, they completed their cycle of chemotherapy. They were getting ready to get discharged. And you could just see they had a different attitude about them. They had kind of a new hope. They had more of a fight. They were ready to fight this new diagnosis. And so going in to do the discharge counseling, they were really receptive to everything we said. You could see they were just kind of more excited. They were thankful for the service that we provided at Roswell, as well as the pharmacy team. And just to see that kind of change in their attitude throughout their stay, and that impact that a pharmacist can have on direct patient care for a patient going through what's probably one of the most difficult times in their life, really just kind of changed my perspective on what I wanted to do in my career. And really, it was really rewarding. And that's kind of where my desire to pursue a career in oncology comes from.
So we just started seeing patients, I think like three or 4 weeks ago. And it's been just nice to we're always with a third-year student and assisting them, but we had pediatric patients a few weeks ago, and one of them had really bad dental anxiety. The third-year student that I was working with was like, I'm not sure how this appointment's gonna go. Last time she was here, it was really bad, and the appointment just went really smoothly, and she was very calm the whole time. And just being able to help her get over her anxiety so that she could get treated was really, really rewarding.
So all of you are in a location, because you live on the same planet that we all live on, that has been impacted by COVID. So how has that impacted your practice and your training?
Yeah, I can go first for that. So I had, so we do six-week rotations. I had 2 of my 6 turn virtual. It was unfortunate, but I was just thankful I was still able to complete the rotations virtually from home. One of the ones was supposed to be an ambulatory care clinic in an oncology setting. So because it was virtual, I did a lot more kind of helping revamp some of the protocols and some of the things they do as in the kind of the outpatient setting. So I learned a ton, and it was my first rotation. So it was great kind of to really dive into drug information, learn a lot about some drugs that were kind of foreign to me, and gave me a really good base of knowledge. But I'm currently on an off rotation, but during my off rotation, I've been volunteering my time at DUville to help out in a COVID testing clinic, as well as helping out at local pharmacies giving COVID vaccines. So being able to kind of have that impact, it's kind of opened up a new point of care opportunity for pharmacists. We've really been kind of trusted to really ramp up vaccinations, as well as help administer tests. So being able to provide tests at my school pharmacy at an affordable price, as well as go into the community and help vaccinate individuals, has been a really rewarding experience that's come out of COVID.
I can go next. So I mentioned a little bit that we were pulled from our clinical rotations at LECOM in March of last year, which is hard to believe that it's already been a year since everything started. And we did do some kind of virtual or just sort of distance learning modules through LECOM. No in-person graduation ceremony, which everybody was really bummed about. Some people, and myself included, bought some commencement regalia. So we just took some pictures in a cap and gown, and they mailed our diplomas to us. So that was kind of a totally different sort of anticlimactic end to medical school. And I'm sure every other graduate in 2020 as well. And then starting residency, again, we did do a lot of visits virtually and telemedicine, which is interesting. I would say in some aspects, it is beneficial for patients that have a hard time getting in, but then other times it's been kind of annoying and frustrating because patient complaints are ones that really should be seen in the office setting. And then in general, so I'm in Altoona, Pennsylvania, which is kind of central if anybody doesn't know where it is, but we didn't really get hit with the first wave of our COVID pandemic, I guess you could say, until November. So kind of October, November time. So our hospital was doing okay in the summertime, and then kind of around Thanksgiving, everything kind of went crazy. Our ICU beds were full. Our hospital was at least over half of the hospital beds were full of COVID patients. They had to sort of convert different hallways and units in the hospital into kind of locked off COVID floors, which was really kind of haunting to walk around. It just seemed like kind of this secluded, like almost a futuristic type scenario with people in these gowns and suits and everything. With the respirators, we would wear PAPRs to go into there. And it was just a really kind of bizarre experience. It was also sort of challenging on our medicine month. So I was on the inpatient medicine service in November. And we did have a decent amount of patients with COVID on our service. So we would kind of take turns with the residents alternating each week to go and see those patients so we can limit our contact with them. And I had an ICU patient that I was following who was intubated for over 17 days. And that's sort of over the limit for most patients. They try to usually cut off around 14 or 15 and then think about doing a tracheostomy tube and more sort of artificial nutrition and things like that. But he held on, was extubated, and ended up surviving a few days on just supplemental oxygen. And then he ended up passing away. And his family wasn't able to see him during any of his ICU stay. His wife eventually was able to come in and see him after he was extubated. So it's just been kind of a really harsh environment for people that are in end of life scenarios and that really can't see their family members. And thankfully, things have gotten a lot better now. I think our COVID numbers were down to 10 or so people in the whole hospital and only 3 people on the ICU or ventilators in the ICU. So it's definitely gotten a lot better, and there is hope with the vaccine. A lot of patients in this area are kind of anti-vaccine and don't even believe COVID's really a thing. So I even had a patient today say that their neighbor felt that way, and they've even seen people die from COVID and still don't really think that it's real. So there's definitely a lot of different views, I think, from patients in general in this area. But definitely have learned a lot. And I think in general, my residency team has learned a lot about talking to families and doing family meetings and kind of discussing palliative care options and plans going forward. So that's definitely been a change and kind of an impact from COVID.
For us, it's just been, we have a lot less lab time. Dentistry is very hands-on, like you're doing procedures and we need to learn how to do those procedures. The first semester, we were doing like lab procedures at home and having lab on Zoom, and that was really difficult. This semester, it's been a lot better. We've been able to get some patient interaction, but all of our didactic courses are still on Zoom. And we go in to take the exam, and that's about it. And then, yeah, it's been also we can't practice in after hours, because it's not like, dentistry is weird. It's not things you can just like try to study and you'll learn it. You have to like train your hands a lot more than some of the other fields. And if you can't do that, that makes it very difficult. But fortunately, we've still been able to be in lab a decent amount of time.
So how has this past year impacted your faith? And then how is your faith thus being able to, you're in a field, of course, where you can't always share your faith, and how that is impacting your desire to treat patients. So how is that impacting your treatment options and your ways to interact with your patients during the time? How is COVID stressed that? Do you find that it's made it more difficult to talk to patients because of the separation that you've been able to feel, just being able to provide that support? Or do you feel that your faith has really been challenged in thinking about how you're going to be able to share in a new world of medicine? I know that's kind of a heavy question, so you know, if you have any thoughts or feelings, it can be, very open, and also just saying it's tough, and that is an honest and real answer too.
I have had some patients, even as a fourth year, I did do an oncology rotation as well, and kind of a hospice and palliative medicine one. And I did have patients ask to pray with me or pray with them before. So I did that for somebody. And then this year, some of my patients sort of openly expressed that they're Christians and that their faith has sort of stayed strong, and they've tried to kind of stay positive. And even though they can't really be in person at church services, they try to watch online. So I think that's kind of inspired me in a sense too, because I've kind of been in the same boat. I haven't been to in-person church in a long time. I've gone the past couple of weeks with my parents when I've been back home at a small church, but it has been sort of hard. And I think people in general, it seems like there's just been kind of a lot of hatred and like bad attitudes, kind of from different aspects. And it has made it hard to kind of stand up, I think, for what I believe in, because even a lot of people in my program, they seem kind of against some of the same values, I think, that I share. Mostly just co-residents, not really so much the attendings. And I actually do have an attending who was a Houghton graduate a long time ago, so that also drew me to Altoona, just side note. But yeah, I think so. It's been hard, I think, to openly share with other people. I know in medical school, I was really active in a church there and small group, and I felt a lot more free to share to my friends who weren't Christians. But yeah, it's been tough, I would say.
Yeah, I think going off what Lizzie said, it was something I was still preparing and still trying to figure out, because my clinical experiences were kind of my first time really having direct one-on-one interaction with patients. On the rotations you do throughout school, you're really just, they're kind of set up for you, and you don't have a lot of one-on-one direct patient interaction. So it's something I definitely had thought about, but you can't really practice putting that into play, like how you're going to kind of be a steward for the Lord and kind of preach the Lord's message to patients who may not want to hear it, or how you go about bringing that conversation up. I found that a lot of patients are a little more forthcoming when they're believers or Christians about their faith, and that somehow gets brought into the conversation, which definitely makes it easier. But it's still something I struggle with, figuring out how to approach those conversations, how to kind of intertwine that into my practice as I'm a pharmacist, into the counseling I'm providing to patients. So, and I think given the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of that was heightened, and it made things more difficult, figuring out other ways to kind of communicate that information. If it's not directly face-to-face, if it's virtual, if it's over a telephone call, because I think I thrive in a setting where I'm talking to people one-on-one, face-to-face. So it's definitely something that I've had to work through. I'm still working through. And it's something I look forward to being able to kind of continue to perfect as I enter a residency, because I'll be going into that clinical setting, talking to patients and working with them every day.
Yeah, like I said before, we haven't really started much in terms of patient interaction, but I've been able to be very involved in the Christian Dental Society at LECOM, which has been really nice to get to know some of my professors and also other students and hear how they have interacted with patients and like been able to talk to patients like that, and also just get to know other people in my class and in other classes who are also Christians, and like where to go to church, like what things there are to. That's been really helpful.
Thank you. I see that our time is almost up, so I'm going to leave you with one. I don't see any other questions in the feed, so I'm going to leave you with one question. What do you guys do for fun? I know that Lizzie has a dog, and sometimes she posts videos of her playing the ukulele. So what else do you do for fun? How do you unwind? How do you relax? How do you get to just be Jordan and Gwen and Lizzie?
Yeah, I can go first. So I was involved in competitive sports all my life. And through Houghton, I really got into working out and lifting weights. And so when the competitive sports ended, my competitive nature didn't. I was still competitive. I still wanted to compete. And so I needed to find a new way to kind of go about fulfilling that competitive nature within me without having sports. So I got really into weightlifting throughout pharmacy school. And actually during my second professional year, I competed in my first bodybuilding competition. So that was kind of something I took on my own. It was my stress reliever, going to the gym. It was fun. So that was something new I did, something I hope to kind of continue and revisit in the future. But that was kind of the fun thing that I did during pharmacy school.
Gwen, what do you do for fun?
I ran a lot at Houghton, and I haven't been running quite as much now, but I've really enjoyed going for walks. There's a lot of parks around where I live, so I'll just like go for a walk after class, and it's a really nice way to get outside and and just relax for a little while.
And you have slightly better weather than we do, at least a couple months ago. You could walk without snowshoes.
Yep.
Lizzie, what else do you do?
So yeah, I do have a dog. I actually don't have him with me right now, but I think I'm going to bring him sort of at the start of second year. And I do play the ukulele sometimes. It's been a while since I've played or made a video. But other things, I do also really enjoy outdoor stuff, and Altoona was also a draw. There is a couple lakes nearby, so I do kayaking in the summertime. There's a lot of walks and hikes there as well. And I actually met my significant other here at orientation in Altoona. So he was teaching me how to snowboard this winter. So we did a lot of snowboarding, which was an experience. And then otherwise, family is really important to me. So I call my family sometimes just to talk and unwind. I make sure to keep in touch with a few good friends from medical school. So we do the house party app or FaceTime a few times at least. We try to do it once a week or once every other week or so. And then I enjoy just kind of catching up on movies or TV shows too. I just finished the WandaVision series on Disney Plus. I don't know if anybody watched that, but so yeah, that's about it.
All right. Well, again, I want to express my gratitude for you guys taking over an hour of your time to be able to talk with us and just talk to us a little bit about your journey at Houghton and beyond. And again, I want to express my gratitude and wish you the best of luck. I was going to end by saying what's next, but I kind of, based on some of the answers that you already gave, we know where you're at, and thinking about what next could be for Jordan, it's graduating and then going on to his residency program. Gwen is getting back in the classroom and actually continuing on in her first and going into her second year. And Lizzie finishing up her residency, and we're figuring out where God's leading her next. So thank you all for joining. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dan Noyes to wrap us up.
Just to add my thanks, thank you, Dr. Potter. And it's neat to see the relationship you still have with these folks. And Yeah, thanks to all of you. I know that your lives are busy in different ways right now, and please let us know if where you are in your journey, if there's ways that Houghton can continue to help. We can help make connections with alumni in the areas that you are or in the fields that you're working in, and that's something we really enjoy doing throughout your life. So as we can be helpful, please do stay connected with your alma mater. And thanks to all of you, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thanks, Lizzie. Thanks, Gwen. Thank you, Jordan.